I had always thought my family saw me as dependable, but I never realized how much that word could turn into a trap until the week before my cousin Olivia's wedding. I'm 58, a retired school teacher who finally started to enjoy quiet mornings, slow coffee, and afternoons tending to my rose garden. Olivia was the daughter of my younger brother, Daniel, and she was getting married at the end of May. It was supposed to be a joyous family event, a weekend filled with laughter, music, and memories. I had even bought a soft lilac dress and matching shoes, something elegant but comfortable enough to dance in. I was looking forward to celebrating, not working, but that assumption changed with one phone call. It was my sister-in-law, Clara. Her voice was sweet, almost too cheerful. The kind of tone people use when they're about to ask for something big. "Sandra, hi, how are you?" she began, stretching the greeting like she had all day. I smiled even though she couldn't see me. "I'm fine, Clara. Just repotting some plants. What's going on?" There was a pause, then a small nervous laugh. "Well, we're finalizing the plans for Olivia's wedding, and we were wondering if you could help us with something special." "Special?" I repeated. "Yes," she said quickly. "You're so good with children and everyone trusts you. So, we thought you could be in charge of the kids during the reception." I froze. "In charge of the kids?" "Yes. Keep them entertained. Make sure they don't run around too much. There will be about 20 of them, give or take." 20? I echoed, my voice sharp. "Yes, but they're all good kids. Mostly cousins and friends' children. It's just that we thought it would be better if someone responsible handled them instead of hiring strangers. You're practically family." "I am family," I said flatly. "That's why I was expecting to be a guest, not an employee." Clara chuckled, a little uneasy now. "Oh, don't think of it like that, Sandra. It's more like you'd be helping everyone have a good time." "So, who's paying me?" I asked. Silence. Then she coughed. "Well, we thought since it's family, you wouldn't mind doing it as a favor." I took a slow breath. "Clara, let me understand this. You're asking me to spend the entire wedding watching 20 kids so that everyone else can enjoy the party?" "Oh, when you say it like that, it sounds bad," she said, almost offensively. "But it's not like that. You'd be helping. That's all." "I already helped," I reminded her. "I paid for the catering deposit last month when the venue asked for an advance and Daniel's card didn't go through." She hesitated again. "And we're so grateful for that, Sandra. Really. But this would mean so much to Olivia. She's nervous about kids running around and ruining the decor." "Clara," I said softly, "Olivia's wedding isn't a preschool field trip. I'm going there to celebrate my niece, not to run a daycare." "Please think about it," Clara insisted. "Everyone agreed it would be perfect for you. You're patient, you know all the children, and they all adore you." I wanted to laugh at the irony. Adoration didn't mean free labor. I ended the call politely, promising to think about it, but the moment I hung up, I sat at my kitchen table stunned. My hands were trembling. Not with anger exactly, but with disbelief. Was that really how my family saw me? A reliable, endlessly giving woman who could be volunteered without consent? The next day, I got confirmation. My brother Daniel called. "Hey, sis," he said cheerfully. "Clara told me you're helping with the kids. That's great. Olivia's thrilled." "Daniel," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, "I haven't agreed to anything." "Oh, come on, Sandra. You're the best at keeping kids in line. It'll be fun. We even arranged for a small play area at the back of the venue. You'll have toys, snacks, everything." "And where will I sit during dinner?" I asked. "Oh, I guess you'll eat with the kids." "So, while everyone else is clinking glasses and dancing, I'll be supervising toddlers?" "Well, when you put it like that, it sounds unfair," he admitted, laughing a little. "But sis, you've always been the generous one. You like helping." "I like helping," I said, "not being used." Daniel sighed. "Please don't make a big deal out of this. Olivia's wedding means a lot to us. Can you just do this one thing?" That sentence hit me like a stone. Just one thing. The same words I'd heard all my life. When my parents passed, I was the one who handled the funeral because everyone else was too emotional. When my brother lost his job, I loaned him money that never came back. When my sister had surgery, I stayed at her house for 2 weeks to take care of her kids. I had always done the one thing. This time, it wasn't going to happen. That night, I sat in bed staring at the lilac dress hanging by my closet. It was beautiful. But suddenly it looked like a costume for a part I no longer wanted to play. I turned off the lamp, but I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying every moment I had sacrificed for my family, every favor they had labeled as just helping out. Around midnight, I made my decision. I wasn't going to the wedding, not as a babysitter, not even as a guest. I was going to take that weekend for myself. The next morning, I called Daniel. "I've thought about your request," I said. "And? I won't be attending the wedding." There was silence on the line, then a shocked, "What? Are you serious?" "Completely." "Sandra, that's absurd. Olivia will be crushed. Olivia will survive. She'll be surrounded by people who treat her day like it's their own. I won't be missed." "This isn't you," Daniel argued. "You're always the one who keeps the family together." "Maybe that's the problem," I said quietly. "I've been keeping the family together while everyone else enjoys the benefits. This time I'm keeping myself together instead." He sighed heavily. "You're overreacting." "No, Daniel," I said, my voice firm. "For the first time in years, I'm reacting just right." When I hung up, I felt something shift inside me, a small but powerful surge of peace, like I had finally remembered my own worth. I didn't owe anyone my time, my labor, or my peace just because we shared a last name. The next day, I booked a weekend trip to the coast. While my family would be dancing under chandeliers, I would be watching waves crash against the shore. For once, I was choosing myself, and I didn't feel guilty about it. The morning of Olivia's wedding dawned bright and clear, the kind of day that photographers dream about and that brides pray for. I woke up to the sound of seagulls and the soft hum of the ocean outside my hotel balcony. I was hundreds of miles away from the chaos I had deliberately left behind. For the first time in years, I had no obligations, no responsibilities, no one expecting me to fix their day. Just me, a quiet seaside town, and a notebook I'd brought along because I had promised myself I would start writing again. I ordered breakfast to my room, a luxury I had never allowed myself, and while sipping coffee, I wondered what my family was doing at that exact moment. I pictured Clara barking last-minute instructions, Daniel trying to calm her down, Olivia pacing nervously in her bridal suite, and 20 restless children running around in miniature tuxedos and frilly dresses. A small, guilty smile crept across my face. It wasn't that I wanted things to go wrong for them, but part of me hoped they would realize what it felt like when the person they counted on finally said no. Around noon, my phone buzzed with messages. Clara: "Sandra, where are you? We've been looking for you since morning." Then Daniel: "Mom says everyone keeps asking about you. Can you at least come for the dinner? Please." I didn't reply to either of them. Instead, I set my phone face down on the nightstand and opened my notebook. The blank page looked intimidating at first, but then words started to flow. About boundaries, about self-respect, about how women like me were so used to giving that we forgot what it felt like to receive. I wrote until my hand ached, and somewhere between sentences, I realized that this moment wasn't just an escape, it was a reclaiming. At around 4 p.m., while I was walking along the shore, I saw a group of children chasing each other near the water. Their laughter echoed in the air, carefree and wild. I thought of the 20 kids back at the wedding and silently wished them joy, even if the adults around them were probably frazzled. For the first time, I could watch children play without being expected to control them. It was liberating in a way that's hard to describe. That evening, I had dinner at a small restaurant overlooking the pier. I chatted with the waitress, who told me she was working double shifts to save for nursing school. She reminded me of my younger self, ambitious, hopeful, and tired. When she brought my dessert, she smiled and said, "You look peaceful, ma'am. Most tourists are glued to their phones." "Maybe because I've spent most of my life glued to other people's expectations," I said with a soft laugh. She chuckled politely, but to me the sentence meant everything. I went back to my hotel and drew a bath. The warm water wrapped around me like a promise that I didn't have to earn rest. I must have stayed there for an hour, eyes closed, breathing deeply. It was strange how silence could be both terrifying and healing at the same time. Around 9 p.m., my phone rang again. It was Daniel. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. "Sandra," he began, his voice strained. "Where are you? Everyone's asking. Mom's worried." "I'm fine, Daniel," I said calmly. "Very fine, actually." "You missed the wedding," he said in disbelief. "I know. That was the plan." "Do you have any idea how awkward this is? People kept asking where you were. Clara told them you were sick." "That was considerate of her," I said dryly. "Well, what did you want her to say? That you refused to come because you didn't want to watch the kids? That would have been the truth," he sighed. "Sandra, it wasn't that big a deal." "Maybe not to you," I said, my tone steady. "But it was to me. Every time I give more than I should, it takes a piece of me I never get back. I've been doing that for decades, Daniel. This time, I kept the peace." "You're really hurt about this, aren't you?" he asked quietly. "It's not just about the wedding," I said. It's about every time I've been expected to say yes because saying no would make me the bad guy. It's about being seen as useful instead of valuable." He was silent for a moment. Then, in a softer tone, he said, "Olivia asked where you were before the ceremony. She looked disappointed." I felt a tug in my chest. "I love Olivia," I said, "but she's an adult now. Maybe this will teach her to look at the people around her differently." "She was crying," Daniel said. "She said she wished you had been there." I closed my eyes. The guilt came as I knew it would, but I let it pass through me. "She'll understand one day," I said. "Maybe not now, but someday." "You always think everything's a lesson," he muttered. "Maybe because it usually is," I replied. After we hung up, I sat by the window watching the waves reflect the moonlight. I thought about Olivia crying and about the empty chair that probably sat at the family table. It hurt, but it also felt necessary. Growth often looks like selfishness to those who benefit from your selflessness. The next morning, I received another message, this time from Olivia herself. "Aunt Sandra, I missed you yesterday. I know things got messy, but I really wish you had been there. The kids were wild and Mom was panicking. We ended up hiring someone last minute, but it wasn't the same. I hope you're okay." I stared at the message for a long time before replying. "I'm okay, sweetheart. I'm glad the wedding went well. We'll talk soon." She responded with a heart emoji, and that was it. The conversation was brief but honest, and that felt like progress. Later that afternoon, I went down to the pier again, sat with my notebook, and wrote, "Sometimes absence speaks louder than presence." It was true. My absence had forced them to adjust, to realize that I wasn't their safety net. Maybe, just maybe, that realization would last. When I returned home 2 days later, I expected tension, maybe even confrontation, but instead, I found a small bouquet of flowers on my porch with a note that read, "We're sorry. We didn't realize how much we were asking. Love, Clara and Daniel." I smiled, set the flowers in a vase, and whispered to myself, maybe they finally did. But deep down, I knew this was just the beginning of a new chapter, one where I would no longer measure love by how much I could sacrifice. A few days after returning home, life settled into a rhythm that felt both unfamiliar and astonishingly peaceful. The house was quiet, the air smelled faintly of roses and lavender, and for once, no one was calling to ask for favors or advice or babysitting. The first few mornings, I woke expecting the phone to buzz with some new request, and when it didn't, I would smile to myself and pour another cup of coffee. It felt like discovering a secret part of my life I'd ignored for too long. But peace, I soon learned, has its own way of testing you. By the end of the week, my mother called. She never calls to chat. She calls when she's chosen a side in a family debate. "Sandra," she began, her voice clipped, "I heard you didn't go to Olivia's wedding." "That's right," I said evenly. "May I ask why?" "You can ask," I replied, and there was a pause before she sighed. "Don't be difficult. Your brother says you refused to help with the children. Is that true?" "I refused to work at a wedding I was invited to as a guest," I said. "Those aren't the same thing." "You could have just said no and still gone," she argued. "It wouldn't have hurt you to lend a hand for a few hours." "It wouldn't have hurt me once," I said, "but it's been happening my whole life, Mom. I was tired." "You've always been the strong one," she said, and I could hear the attempt at flattery in her tone. "Families rely on people like you." "That's exactly the problem," I replied. "You raised me to think love means doing everything for everyone else, even when it costs me. But that's not love. That's exhaustion." She went quiet, and for a brief second, I thought maybe she understood. Then she said, "Well, people noticed your absence, Sandra. I hope it was worth it." "It was," I said, and hung up before the guilt could creep back in. After that call, I realized how deep the roots of obligation ran in our family. Generations of women, my mother, her sisters, even my grandmother, had been taught that their worth was tied to how much they gave. And now that I had stopped giving, they didn't know where to place me. Later that week, I went to the local library, something I hadn't done in years. I used to love walking through the aisles, running my fingers along the spines of books, letting titles whisper promises of new worlds. That day, I borrowed 3 novels and a book about coastal towns. The librarian, a cheerful woman with glasses that slid down her nose, asked if I was planning a trip. "I just came back from one," I said with a smile, "and I think I might start planning another." "Good for you," she said. "You'd be surprised how few people take time for themselves." "You'd be surprised how many people don't think they're allowed to," I replied. I spent the next few evenings reading by the window, the hum of the crickets outside mixing with the turning of pages. I found myself thinking about the wedding less and less, but occasionally I'd picture the children running wild at the reception and chuckle to myself. Then, one afternoon, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, Olivia was standing there, still radiant even without the wedding dress, her hair pulled back in a loose bun, holding a small white box. "Aunt Sandra," she said softly, "I wanted to see you." "Come in," I said, surprised but not unkindly. She stepped inside, glancing around as if seeing my house for the first time. "You live so peacefully here," she murmured. "I can see why you didn't want to leave." "Peaceful isn't something you find," I said, motioning her toward the sofa. "It's something you decide to keep." She smiled faintly, then handed me the box. "This is for you. It's a slice of wedding cake. We saved it." I took it gently, feeling a pang of something that wasn't quite regret, but close. "Thank you," I said. "I'm glad you came." She sat across from me, folding her hands nervously. "I wanted to say I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't know Mom and Dad asked you to babysit the kids. If I had known, I would have told them no. That wasn't fair to you." I looked at her and saw not the disappointed bride my brother had described, but a young woman trying to understand the world beyond her own celebration. "It's all right," I said. "I made my choice, and I'm at peace with it." "Everyone was panicking when you didn't show up," she said. "The kids were running everywhere, the decorations got torn, and the photographer nearly quit. But later that night, when I finally sat down, I thought about you. I realized how often we expect you to fix things, like you're the family anchor." "Anchors are heavy," I said quietly. "Sometimes they need to be lifted too." She nodded, her eyes glistening. "I didn't see it before. I guess I grew up watching everyone depend on you. It just felt normal." "That's how patterns work," I said. "They feel normal until someone breaks them." She smiled, a little sad but sincere. "I think you did the right thing, Aunt Sandra. Everyone's been forced to handle their own chaos this week, and it's been eye-opening." "Growth usually comes from discomfort," I said, echoing something I'd once told my students. I didn't mean to hurt anyone, but sometimes saying no is the only way to be heard. "Mom and Dad felt awful afterward," she said. "They've been talking about it nonstop. They didn't realize how much they took you for granted." "Maybe now they'll start seeing me as a person, not a role," I said. "That's all I ever wanted." We talked for another hour, about her honeymoon plans, about how she wanted to visit Italy someday, and about how marriage wasn't turning out as perfectly as the movies promised. When she finally stood to leave, she hugged me tightly. "Thank you for teaching me something important," she whispered, "even if you didn't mean to." After she left, I opened the box and looked at the slice of cake, white frosting, a single sugar rose, still perfectly shaped despite the journey. I took a small bite, and it tasted sweet but different, like closure. That night, I wrote again in my notebook, "Boundaries are not walls, they are gates we can choose when to open." I set down my pen, leaned back, and for the first time in years, felt genuinely free. 2 weeks passed after Olivia's visit, and the quiet of my house began to feel like a friend I didn't know I needed. The phone didn't ring as often, and when it did, it was for reasons that didn't demand my time or energy. One afternoon, while watering my plants, I heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. When I looked out, I saw my brother Ethan stepping out with a hesitant expression and holding a bouquet of sunflowers, my favorite. That alone told me he was nervous. I opened the door before he could knock. "You can come in," I said, crossing my arms but smiling faintly. He scratched the back of his neck, the way he used to when he was caught doing something wrong as a kid. "You're not going to throw me out, are you?" "Depends on why you're here," I replied, motioning him inside. He followed, setting the flowers on the table. "Peace offering," he said. "They're lovely," I replied. "Now what's this about?" He sat down on the couch and exhaled deeply. "I came to apologize. I've been thinking a lot about the wedding, and I realize I owe you more than just an apology. I owe you respect." I raised an eyebrow. "That's a strong word coming from you." He nodded. "Yeah, well, it's one I haven't used often enough. I thought about how quick I was to assume you'd take care of everything, like you always do. And then when you didn't show up, I was angry. But mostly because I had to face how much we've all relied on you without giving anything back." I didn't say anything at first. I wanted him to sit with that silence, to really feel it. "Ethan," I finally said, "I don't hold a grudge, but I need you to understand that I didn't make my decision to punish anyone. I did it to remind myself that I have a choice." "I get that now," he said, "and honestly, it made me think about how we were raised. Mom taught us that helping family is everything, but she never taught us where the line is. You drew that line for the first time, and it scared us. Boundaries usually do, I said softly, especially to those who benefit from not having them. He chuckled ruefully. You sound like a therapist. Maybe one day I'll be one, I said, half joking. But for now, I'm just a woman learning how to take care of herself. Ethan looked around the house, his eyes landing on the stack of books by the window, the notebooks on my desk, and the vase of wildflowers. You seem lighter, he said. I am, I replied. You have no idea how exhausting it was to constantly be the reliable one. He leaned forward. Well, you'll be glad to know that after the wedding, the family had to learn fast. Mom tried to organize a post-wedding dinner, and when she couldn't find anyone to help, she realized how much she'd leaned on you. It was chaos, but it made her rethink things. I hope so, I said, but I don't expect miracles. He smiled. Maybe not, but something changed. Even Olivia's been different. She told me she's been more involved in helping out with her in-laws instead of just showing up and expecting everything done for her. That surprised me. She's learning quickly then. You made an impression, he said. Even if you weren't there physically, your absence spoke louder than anything. I didn't know how to respond to that, so I simply nodded and offered him tea. We sat quietly for a while, the kind of silence that felt comfortable instead of strained. Then he asked, Do you ever regret it? I knew what he meant. No, I said firmly. For once I did something entirely for myself. And you know what? The world didn't fall apart. He smiled, shaking his head. You're tougher than all of us combined. Not tougher, I said. Just tired of pretending that sacrifice is the same as love. He stayed for another hour, talking about work, about his kids, about how strange it felt not to have me coordinating every family event. When he finally left, he hugged me tighter than he had in years. You were right, he whispered. Sometimes saying no is the only way to reset everything. After he drove away, I stood by the window and watched the sun sink behind the hills. The golden light poured across my living room, touching the framed photos of our family, the smiling faces that looked back at me from a different time. I wondered what they would all look like now, less demanding, perhaps, more aware. That evening, I sat down with a fresh notebook and wrote, Freedom isn't something you're given. It's something you claim and protect every single day. The words felt like a small revelation. Over the next few days, I started saying yes again, but only when it felt right. When my neighbor, Mrs. Patel, asked if I could join her for a morning walk, I said yes. When an old friend invited me to a pottery class, I said yes again. But when my cousin texted asking if I could host her book club because you're so good at these things, I politely declined. It felt powerful, not cruel. By the end of the month, something remarkable happened. I received a handwritten letter in the mail. It was from my mother. I unfolded the paper carefully, expecting a scolding, but instead I found her neat, cursive words trembling slightly across the page. Sandra, I've been thinking about our last conversation. You were right. I did raise you to give and to serve, but I never meant for you to lose yourself in it. I'm proud of you for standing your ground. Maybe it's time I learned to say no, too. I read that letter 3 times, tears forming despite myself. It wasn't a full transformation, but it was a start. Later that night, I called her. When she answered, her voice was softer than I'd heard in years. Hi, Mom, I said. Thank you for the letter. You deserved it, she said. And I mean what I wrote. You've taught me something important. Maybe we women have been too proud of our endurance and not proud enough of our boundaries. It's never too late to change, I said. You taught me that, remember? We both laughed quietly, and for the first time, our conversation didn't end with guilt or obligation. It ended with mutual respect. That night, I sat by the window again, looking out at the stars, and thought, sometimes the smallest act of defiance can heal generations of silence. The weeks rolled into months, and what began as a single act of refusal slowly became the foundation for a new kind of life. I began teaching a small writing class at the community center every Thursday evening. Nothing formal, just a gathering of people who wanted to learn how to tell their stories. There was something liberating about helping others express what they'd been too polite or too afraid to say aloud. Every session reminded me that my story, the one that began with a simple no, wasn't unique. Everyone in that room had been stretched thin by expectations, by families that confused love with obligation. There was June, a retired nurse who still volunteered every weekend because she didn't know how to say no to the hospital staff who begged her to cover shifts. There was Paul, a widower who always hosted family dinners even though he longed for quiet. And there was Carmen, a mother of 4, who said the only time she ever felt heard was when she wrote in her journal. Listening to them made me realize how universal my struggle had been. Saying no wasn't rebellion, it was survival. One evening after class, as I was locking up, I saw Ethan waiting outside the building. "What are you doing here?" I asked, surprised. He smiled. "Mom told me you've been teaching. I thought I'd see what my sister the storyteller looks like in action." I laughed softly. "You're late. You missed the class." "I wasn't here to join," he said. "I wanted to talk." We walked to a cafe nearby and sat by the window, watching people drift through the streetlights. "Mom's been doing better," he said. "She started attending that yoga class she always talked about, and she told me she's stopped volunteering at church every single weekend." I smiled, genuinely pleased. "That's good. I'm proud of her." "You should be," Ethan said. "You were her wake-up call." "Maybe," I said, stirring my tea, "but she still did the hard part herself." "You really think so?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "It takes courage to unlearn habits that were praised for a lifetime." He nodded thoughtfully. "You know, after everything that happened, Olivia and I have started talking differently, too. She admitted she felt bad for how she treated you before the wedding. She said watching how you handled everything made her rethink how she talks to people who help her." "That's good to hear," I said, though I kept my tone neutral. I wasn't looking for their approval. "But I'm glad they've learned something." "Actually," he said, leaning forward, "there's more. Olivia and her husband are expecting a baby." I froze for a moment, caught between surprise and an odd sense of déjà vu. "Already?" "Already," he said, grinning. "And she told me she's been thinking about asking you to be part of the baby's life, but only if you want to. She said she'll respect your space either way." I couldn't help smiling. "That's unexpected." "I think she really means it," he said. "She's changed." "Maybe we all have," I said softly. Later that night when I returned home, I sat at my desk and pulled out the notebook that had become my quiet companion through this entire journey. I began to write about legacy, the invisible kind that isn't measured in heirlooms or money, but in lessons quietly absorbed by those around us. I wrote about my mother learning to rest, my brother learning to apologize, Olivia learning to reflect, and me, learning that peace doesn't come from perfection, but from boundaries built with care. A few weeks later, Olivia called. Her voice trembled slightly. "Aunt Sandra, I wanted to tell you the news myself," she said. "We're having a baby." "Ethan told me," I said warmly. "Congratulations." "Thank you," she said. "And I also wanted to ask something else. I know I have no right to, given how things were, but would you consider being part of the baby's life, as much or as little as you want? I don't want to assume anything." I paused, feeling the weight of her sincerity. "Olivia, I would love to be part of your child's life," I said. "But I want to do it in a way that feels balanced for both of us." "That's all I want," she said quickly. "Balance." There was a long, comfortable silence before she added, "Thank you for giving me a chance to make things right. You gave yourself that chance," I said. "You just had to take it." Over the following months, Olivia and I began rebuilding something fragile but real. She would call every few weeks, not to ask for help, but to share updates about her pregnancy, about her morning sickness, about how nervous and excited she was. Sometimes she asked for advice, but always with care, always waiting for my permission before assuming I had time. And slowly, trust began to bloom in the quiet spaces between our conversations. When she finally gave birth to a baby girl, she called me from the hospital, her voice cracking with emotion. "Her name is Clara," she said. "I wanted you to be the first to know after family." I smiled, tears welling up unexpectedly. "That's a beautiful name," I whispered. "I'm honored." "I'd love for you to meet her," she said, "but only when you're ready." "I'll come soon," I said, "and I'll bring something special." When I hung up, I looked around my living room, at the framed letter from my mother, at the little vase of sunflowers Ethan had brought weeks ago, now dried but still golden. Everything in that room told a story of transformation, not dramatic or loud, but steady and honest. The next morning, I baked a small batch of cookies, the same recipe my grandmother used to make, and wrapped them in a tin decorated with soft blue ribbons. When I arrived at the hospital, Olivia's eyes filled with tears. She handed me the baby carefully, as if passing a promise. "This is your great niece," she said softly. I looked down at the tiny face nestled in the blanket, her breath warm and delicate, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace, without guilt. "Welcome to the world, Clara," I whispered. "You have no idea how much courage it took to get here." Olivia smiled through tears. "You taught us all that courage, Aunt Sandra." And as I rocked that small life in my arms, I realized that saying no had made room for 1,000 better yeses. The months after Clara's birth unfolded like a quiet season of healing. Olivia and I developed a gentle rhythm, occasional visits, short phone calls, small gestures that spoke louder than grand apologies ever could. She never assumed I was free, never hinted at favors. Instead, she asked about my writing, about the classes, about my garden. For the first time, our conversations weren't wrapped in obligation. They were simply human. Ethan called often, too, telling me how Mom had started painting again and how she'd even joined a book club. "She's different now," he said one afternoon. "Less controlling, more content." I smiled. "That's good to hear. Maybe she's finally realizing that happiness doesn't come from managing everyone else's life." "She says you taught her that," he replied. "You might have started a revolution." I laughed softly. One quiet woman at a time. The house felt alive again, filled with small things that made me happy. A new teapot, fresh tulips every week, the hum of the radio while I cooked. Freedom didn't look like fireworks. It looked like peace in motion. One afternoon, as I was tidying the kitchen, the phone rang. It was Olivia. "Aunt Sandra," she said, her voice bright, "Clara's christening is next month. We're having a small gathering, and we'd love for you to come. No expectations, no responsibilities. Just as a guest." I hesitated for a second, remembering the sting of the wedding invitation months ago, but then I heard something genuine in her voice. Humility, warmth, care. "I'd love to come," I said. "Thank you for inviting me." "It wouldn't feel right without you there," she said. When the day arrived, I dressed simply. A soft blue dress, a pearl brooch my grandmother once gave me. I drove to the church with no sense of duty pressing on my shoulders, only curiosity about how it would feel to show up as a participant in my own story, not a servant done in someone else's. When I walked into the chapel, Olivia's face lit up. "You came," she whispered, hugging me tightly. "Of course I did," I said. "I told you, I choose when to say yes." The ceremony was beautiful. Clara looked like a tiny angel wrapped in lace, and for once, everything ran smoothly without anyone running around in panic. I watched from the pews as Ethan helped with the candles, as Mom smiled proudly, as Olivia and her husband stood side by side with gratitude written all over their faces. After the service, we gathered in the small reception hall. There were sandwiches, soft music, laughter. No one treated me like the coordinator, the helper, or the reliable fallback. I was simply Aunt Sandra. At one point, Olivia's husband, Daniel, approached me with a glass of lemonade. "I wanted to thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" I asked. "For giving Olivia a chance to learn," he said. "You could have cut us all off after that wedding, and no one would have blamed you, but you didn't." I smiled. Sometimes the best way to teach people is by stepping back and letting them face the consequences of their choices. "She admires you," he said. "She talks about you all the time, says you're the kind of woman she wants to become." His words settled deep inside me, not as pride, but as peace. After the reception, I stayed behind for a few minutes, helping Olivia gather gifts, not because she asked, but because I wanted to. It was the difference between obligation and choice, and it felt beautiful. As I was about to leave, she handed me a small package wrapped in soft paper. "This is for you," she said. "Open it later." When I got home, I set it on my table and went about my evening. It wasn't until the next morning, when sunlight filtered through the curtains, that I opened it. Inside was a notebook bound in deep green leather. On the first page, in Olivia's neat handwriting, it said, "For Aunt Sandra, who taught me that love without respect isn't love at all." I ran my fingers over the words, feeling tears sting my eyes. That afternoon, I sat at my desk and began writing again. Not just in my private reflections, but something larger. A book of lessons, of memories, of recipes and reflections from years of giving and finally learning to receive. I called it Lessons from the Quiet Years. It wasn't about revenge or regret. It was about rediscovering the balance between heart and boundaries. When it was finished, I held the first printed copy in my hands and thought of all the women I'd known, my mother, my aunts, Olivia, each of us learning, sometimes painfully, that saying no can be an act of love. On the day of the book's small launch at the community center, the room was filled with familiar faces, my students, Ethan, Mom, and even Olivia holding Clara on her lap. When it was my turn to speak, I said, "This book isn't about anger. It's about respect, the kind that begins with yourself. It's about the courage to say no, even when the world calls it selfish, and the beauty of discovering that boundaries don't push people away. They invite the right ones to stay. The audience clapped, but more than the applause, I saw something that mattered far more: understanding. Afterward, Olivia hugged me. "You've changed all of us," she said. "No," I replied softly. "We all changed together." That night, when I returned home, I placed the green notebook beside my first draft and made myself a cup of tea. As I sat by the window, the evening light spilling across the pages, I smiled and whispered to myself, "Sometimes saying no is the most powerful way to say yes to yourself."